Module 4 bonus drawing. Hi, Joe Cerrone. We're going to draw this bathroom vanity using AutoCAD. We're going to get started by downloading a B-size title block by going into D2L Arc Templates, B-size. We'll download that. We'll open it. Alright, so this is our B-size title block. I'm going to change the background color by right-clicking and selecting Options, Display Colors, and I'm going to change the 2D model space to white. Apply and close, and OK. We're going to make sure that our menu bar is on. And now you can see the menu bars across the top. And then we're going to make sure that we have all of our settings on, except for invert constraints. And we're good. We're going to go to the layer, furniture, and make furniture layer active. I'm going to turn on my line weights. And then as we look at this drawing, we're going to set up our snap, and we have these relatively small snap increments of 1/2 an inch, 3/4. So I'm going to make the snap 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll make the grid 6 inches. And that'll be in line with the smallest increment, or when we look at the measurements on the dresser, or excuse me, on the vanity, everything is within like 1/4 of an inch. So 3/4, 1/2 an inch are all increments of 1/4 of an inch. And so by setting the snap, tools, drafting settings, 1/4, that'll make the units 1/4 of an inch, and then for our grid spacing we'll make that 6 inches. We'll enable polar tracking, and we'll have OSNAP on, and we'll say OK. We'll zoom down, and then what the author wants us to do is to start off by drawing a 4 foot by 2 foot 10 rectangle. And then we can use explode to break that into individual line segments, and then use some of the commands from our previous chapters like offset, trim, extend, erase. We'll start with the rectangle command, and then we'll start that at any convenient spot. So it wants us to pick the first point, and then we'll go dimensions, and then for our length we'll say 4 feet. And for our width we'll say 2 feet 10 inches. And then depending on where we move the mouse, it'll be either go up or down. I'm going to go up. Alright. And then if we click on one of the squares, we can see that that is correctly drawn. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our drawing, and we're going to start using offset and trim. And I think we'll create this like we did in the chapter 3 for the dresser, where we'll start with these legs on the side, and what we'll do is we'll explode that rectangle, which is 4 feet by 2 feet 10, which is right within the size of these legs. And then what we'll do is we'll offset this line here 2 inches, and then we'll trim, and then we'll copy this over to this side here 4 feet away. So we'll explode our rectangle, and what that'll do is it'll break it into individual line segments. And so now they're line segments. If we would have said explode and then clicked on it, it would have done the same thing. Then what we'll do is we'll offset that 2 inches to the inside, And then what we'll do is we'll offset this side 2 inches back. Rather than copy it, since this is 4 feet, we'll offset this line 2 inches. You can see my dynamic input is on, and with dynamic input the information follows the cursor. And then I think we'll start with this bottom, and what we'll do here is we'll have to find what this measurement is. Resuming. So I can't find a dimension for this height here, so I'm going to have to create the model from the top down. And so we have this 2 foot 10 inch line right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to offset that 3/4 of an inch and then 1/2 an inch to each side. And then we can extend these. A quick way and kind of a trick is to use the fillet command with a radius of 0. And so you can use fillet with a radius of 0, and that'll corner these objects. The other way to do that would be, if I undo this, would be to use the extend command, but it won't extend it out to a line it doesn't meet. And so one of these lines needs to be extended for it to happen. And so we could just pull this one like that, and then you can use extend. And then trim and extend again and trim again. And we'll do the same on the other side. We'll extend this out just by pulling the grip. Extend. Notice that the cursor changes to a small square. You can right mouse click, terminate the command, and then we can switch over to trim. Extend again, trim again, and that takes care of the top component. We can trim out this bottom component here also with trim. Might as well take that out. And then it's not a bad idea to put a dimension on just to make sure that all our numbers are lining up. And so I'm going to go to the dimension layer. I'm going to put on a linear dimension using O-snap from the bottom here to this edge here, to that corner. And that's correct. And so that's 2 feet 10 inches. And then we should have 3/4 of an inch right here. And we do. So far so good. If we look at the horizontal measurements, then we should have 4 feet from the outside to the outside of the vanity. And we do. Alright, continuing on, if we look at the vanity, we can start to work from the top down. We've created this top layer, and then we're going to go and offset another 3/4 of an inch, and then we're going to create these drawers. And these drawers are 6 inches with a 3/4 inch shelf in between them. So what we'll do is we'll offset this line 3/4 of an inch, and then we'll trim, and then we'll offset this 6 inches, 3/4, 6 inches, 3/4, 6 inches, 3/4, etc. Zooming in, offset, three-fourths, and then we'll trim that. When you trim, if you don't want to leave any leftover pieces, you can go from the left side to the inside, and that'll save you, well, actually it'll erase now. It used to not do that, but it does now. It's a more efficient command. And so we have that, and then we're going to offset this line right here 6 inches and then 3/4, and so that measurement is given right here and right here, and so those are standard. And then what we'll do is we'll repeat the offset with 3/4, (6 inches), (3/4). Note you don't have to put in the inch mark like that. It's the default if you don't put the inch mark in. So when I offset, I can just put 6. There are faster ways to create these constructions, but I like to use the same commands over and over again when we start off in the beginning. Now down at the bottom we have a 2-inch piece of wood right here, and then we can start to divide this into the drawers. So one more offset, 2 inches, and then as we continue, what we're going to do is we're going to offset this line right here 9.5 inches, and then we're going to offset that 3/4 of an inch. Offset 9 and a half. This line here to that side. Repeat the offset with 3/4 of an inch. And then we'll trim, and we'll use trim fence. And so you can either select each of these like this, or we can start to trim these. Now let's see, we need this right here, and then if you just hold the button down on the mouse and just drive it down like this, and actually I don't want to do that, so I'm going to hold off on that. Let's just do this one over here. So you can either click on them or you can drag the mouse through using what's called a fencing selection set. So you can either click on them or you can drive it like that. And I need to undo that last part. Hopefully it won't undo all of them. It undid all of them. So we'll just get better with the trim command. right. So we've got these shapes created, and then what we're going to do is we're going to offset this line 1 foot 11.5 inches, and then this will be another 3/4 inch typical, and then we'll be able to repeat that pattern. So we're going to offset this 1 foot 11.5 inches. And then we'll offset that 3/4. And then we can trim that and then verify with a measure distance just to check. You could also use dimensions as well. So we'll say trim. Again, you can either drag and hold the cursor, or you can just individually select them. And then we'll take out these middle ones here we don't need. All right, so let's check to make sure that this one is also 6 inches, and we can use a measure utility command for distance, and then we can just measure from this endpoint to that endpoint, and it's showing me 9.5 inches, and that was the correct dimension. It's 9.5 inches wide by 6 inches tall. And so if we wanted to measure the height, you can see that that's 6 inches as well, or 6 inches. All right, continuing. We can put the cabinet doors here, and what we'll do is we will offset the door frames are 2 inches, and so we'll just offset 2 inches all the way around and trim. And on this one, I'm going to trim using a fillet with a radius of 0. It's just a quick way to corner things. And so we'll use the fillet command with a radius of 0. To create that shape. And then we can draw a line from the midpoint to the midpoint for this line right here. So we'll say line, and then we'll check to see that we have midpoint enabled. There's our midpoint, and we'll bring that down to our midpoint. Somehow I got onto the dimension layer. Here's a quick way to change that. You can click on that line and then put it on the correct layer, and then hit escape. And then we can offset this 2 inches to each side. And continue to trim. All right. So we've got our drawers and we've got our cabinets. Let's put the hardware on for the drawer pulls. The drawer pulls are 1.5, a half inch by 5.5 inch. And so what we want to do here is to offset to be able to find that location. So we'll offset this line 2 3/4, and then half an inch, and then 2 inches, and then 5.5 inches as we create that. So if we zoom in on this top drawer, zoom and pan, I'm going to offset 2 3/4. And then I'm going to offset 2 inches. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll change the colors to kind of make things look a little bit easier to read. And so what you can do, let's go switch this back over to the furniture layer. And then what I can do is I can click on these two lines, and if I want to change them to, let's say we want the handle pulls to be brown. And I can't seem to find a good brown. It looks okay. There we go. And so I'll use that technique to kind of keep some of the lines from getting confusing. And then when you offset those, it'll remain the same colors and properties. So if I can offset half an inch for the thickness of the handle, and then the other length was 5.5 inches, so it's half by 5.5 inches. And this was our construction here. And then we can trim. And so we can trim this. You could also use my fillet method. Remember, when you trim, you can just drag them through. And then these other ones we can just erase. We'll select them and select erase. And then we'll just use the copy command to copy these from a known location. So we'll copy this geometry here for the drawer pull, and we'll use this endpoint or intersection. And so we'll say copy. We'll select the object to copy. We'll hit enter. Copy it from the base point will be this endpoint right here, and then the destination will be this endpoint. And then it's a modal command, meaning we can continue to copy. Using our object snaps. All right. We need one more here in the middle, and this one is located 9 inches from this edge. Again, we'll just use the offset command, and then we can erase the line afterwards. And then what we'll do is we'll copy this one straight across here. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll make a construction line so I can see where that lines up. And then what I'll do is I'll copy it using a blue window, only selects the brown geometry, and I'll copy it from this endpoint to this endpoint, or to that intersection. And then erase the construction lines. And then we can go ahead and add these 1-inch square knobs located 4 3/4 of an inch from this line here to the center, and then they're located 1 inch off the center line. So let's change the color. Well, let's offset it, and then we'll change the color. And so we'll offset that 1 inch. From the center line to the side, and we'll make our knobs. Let's go with orange. Actually, I think we'll use the same color that we used last time. There we go. And then we'll offset the location of that 4 3/4 of an inch down from the middle edge. Match properties will match the colors, and so this is the match properties command, source, destination, and that's another quick way to be able to modify and change colors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a square there, or a rectangle, and it doesn't have like a center rectangle command, which would be nice, because if we had a center rectangle we could just put one on there really quite quickly. But these are, apparently it looks like they're 1 inch or 2 inch. Doesn't have the exact geometry on there, so let's try offsetting this a 1/2 inch. We'll go 1/2 inch this way, 1/2 inch up, and a 1/2 inch down, and then we'll trim that. Again, you can just drive these through, or you can select on them individually. And then we'll erase the other construction lines. And all I'm going to do is select them with the green window and then hit the erase command. I'm going to mirror that to the other side. So we'll say mirror. Select the object to mirror. Hit enter. And then using O-snaps, grab the middle geometry. Erase source object, no. Alrighty, we can put we have the overall dimensions on here, so I think that's great. We have our overall length, and we have the height. The height is actually a little bit taller and slightly wider, but I think we're fine. Turn off the grid. Let's go to the layout mode. We'll double click on the viewport and do a view, zoom, all, or you could double click the middle mouse wheel. And as long as we're in that viewport, this is the viewport, we'll be able to dial in a scale for that. Let's try 1 inch equals a foot. Go a little bit bigger, I think. And then we'll lock that scale in. So we've got 1.5 inches equals a foot. We'll lock that in, and then we want to note that on the title block. And so down here, we can update the title block information. Put your student name here. And then update the title block. This will be add the date, and again add the scale again. We'll save the drawing, File, save as, and we'll save this as our initials, and we can call it Vanity, or you can call it Module 4 Bonus. And that completes this video tutorial.